kids know that if you plant a seed, you don't wake up tomorrow and there's a magic tree's just appeared. They know it's going to happen in the future. And so it's just an easier way for us to talk about it. And then we then apply the detail as they get a bit older. But even from the age of 4, they know that they've got this kind of magical forest growing.
Welcome to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Are you trying to get out of debt, invest, or just not sure where to start? Then this is the place for you. We discuss different ways to get out of the rat race and build your wealth. Join us on this wild ride to financial freedom.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni, and today's guest is Will Rainey. So Will, I am super excited to talk to you. We were talking a little bit off camera about where he's at right now. He's all over the place, but he just moved a week ago and he's able to get all of his stuff together to have this conversation with us today. So Will, I am super excited about this conversation. And tell us where you're at right now.
So I'm just moved to north of Thailand. So I'm the other side of the world to you completely almost.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. And so the first question I'd like to ask, it's the same question I ask everybody that comes on the show. And this is going to be the big thing that gets this whole thing moving. And we want to know about you and your background, your story. So if you could share that with us, how did you get started? And obviously you're traveling around the world now, right? Moving all over the world. So that's awesome. So you had to do something to get to this point. So that's what we want to talk about today. So share your story with us.
Sure. So I'm from the UK originally. And so I'm an actuary trained and background. So for people who've never heard of an actuary, it's essentially an accountant who loves statistics. So doing lots of risk analysis for very large companies. So I worked as an investment consultant in the UK for 9 years. So helping some of the largest institutions about where to put their money. So that's insurance companies, pension, retirement schemes, governments. Then we thought we'd do a bit of a change. So my company offered me a role in Hong Kong. So in 2014, my wife, and we had a 2-year-old daughter at the time, moved to Hong Kong. And so I got to work covering the whole of Asia. So I was head of investment strategy for Asia and loved it. Again, doing the same kind of role, talking to some of the world's largest institutions about how to look after their money and where to invest their money. Then it was around 2017. I was just talking to someone about my 2 young daughters. And they said to me, enjoy this time with them. They only grow up once. Which is a kind of very obvious statement, but it had a real big impact on me. And I was like, yeah, and they're growing up so fast. I want to spend more time with them. And I'd recently just read the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And so we're like, okay, we've been saving, investing for the longest time. Why don't we plan to take some time off corporate work? And that's what we did. So in 2019, my wife and I left corporate work, we left Hong Kong, and we moved to Hoi An in Vietnam, which is like the best place in the world. It's a little town, but it's like beautiful rice paddy fields, beaches. And so we took time off to spend more time with the kids, put them in an international school. So we weren't going completely bohemian. And whilst the kids were at school, I wanted to do a project. I wanted to be doing something. I didn't want to just be sitting around. And it took me back to when I was leaving Hong Kong. A lot of people said to me, how can we afford to take this time off work? Like, how do we finance it? We're not working full time. And I was like, well, we've been saving and investing for the longest time. So we're going to live off that. And we had property in the UK, so we've got rental from that. And everyone's like, oh, I wish I had done that as well. And it turns out, even though I worked in the financial services industry, not many people were doing what we were doing. They weren't saving and investing. I think largely because they're earning good money, they're always like, I can spend because I can always just earn some more. And they had that mentality. So I thought, that's a bit sad that they can't do what we're doing. So how fortunate my wife and I were. And it turns out our parents were savers, so we're savers. And so I really wanted to have that for my daughters. I want my daughters to be able to have this opportunity to take time off and spend with their kids if they have kids when they're older. And so I started to just teach them about money. But I wanted to make it interesting, as we'll probably talk about later. Like 2 of my favorite books about money were Rich Dad, Poor Dad and The Richest Man in Babylon, which is always a storytelling way of talking about money. So when I was putting my kids to bed, I would start talking about a different money topic, but using stories. And so then I started to write about these stories because my kids loved them, and sharing them with friends and family. And then it just got bigger and bigger. And one of my blogs around how I taught my kids about the stock market got picked up by the Financial Times in the UK. And then companies were like, can you come and talk to us, to our employees, about how they can teach their kids about money? And it built on from there. And then after a while, I had a number of these little mini stories that then I created a book, which is for those people who've got on YouTube. I've got Grandpa's Fortune Fables, which is kind of a 14 chapter, every chapter, a different story about money, to try and make it as fun as possible for kids. So that's my story. And then, we've been in Vietnam for 3 years, and then we're come to Thailand for a new adventure, different schooling for the kids. So that's my story.
Yeah. Oh, that's just awesome. And it's funny because we were talking off camera about, I was telling you about what I thought like immediately when looking at this book was that this is like the children's version of The Richest Man in Babylon. So it's funny because it goes back to how much of an impact that book made on you. And one of the things that I really like about that book too is each chapter is another story about something involving money or investing or saving, just a different topic of how to do it, how to lend money. It's wonderful. And now you've got this book that talks about this stuff, but to a child, right? And one of the things that I've talked about in this podcast several times, and it's just so frustrating, is how there's such a lack of financial education out there, especially for young people, right? And you even see that like when you were getting invited out to go speak at these different corporate events, right? People, hey, can you come talk to our employees about money and how to invest and like how to do this? Because nobody gets taught this stuff. So you go into adulthood and you're given a paycheck and you're like, okay, hey, figure it out. And you try to figure out the whole work-life balance piece. You try to figure out, I got to pay my bills. And then how much do I have left over? Oh, I'm making enough money. I could just spend it, right? Where they should be saving some of that. But the thing is, they were never taught to do that. With what you're doing right now with your book and just being able to provide this financial literacy piece, that's something I appreciate more than anything else when I bring people on this show to talk about this stuff. And that's the whole purpose of what this podcast is about, is to teach financial literacy to other people, because there's so many different ways to do it. Yeah, I got plenty of real estate investors that come on and share what they're doing. And I've got plenty of other people that come on and talk about what they're doing in the stock market or crypto or anything else like that. But when we could sit down here and talk about some of the basic concepts that you need to understand, it's always a real treat to have someone on to talk about that stuff. So speaking about teaching kids about money, right? Why is it that it's so important? At least I have a feeling I know why it's so important. But what would you say is the most important thing about teaching kids about money and why building wealth is so important?
Money, in my mind, is about habits and the actions that you take. It's not so much about how many textbooks you've read and how many acronyms about money and all the jazz. It's about what actions. So as we just talked about The Richest Man in Babylon, right? So you've got an adult who reads that and they go, okay, this is good. But they've got to then read it and go, I'm not doing 90% of this. So I've got to change everything that I'm doing to try and follow the kind of principles. So saving 1 out of every 10, investing, blah, blah, blah. It's really hard to change what actions you've been doing for the last, it could be years and decades, you've been doing the same actions. And we all know how hard it is to change. Whereas kids, they're completely fresh. They don't have these inbuilt bad habits of always spending, overspending, consumption. So if we can teach kids from the youngest age to have these habits of just every time they get some money, they just put it away straight away. And so when they're adults, that's just what they do. They know about investing. They know that money can grow. So they don't have to think about it when they're older. They're just doing it. And so there's actually been research by Cambridge University in England where they looked at when people start to form like their money habits. And it's surprisingly, it's the age of 7. So by the age of 7, most of our money adult behaviors are already started to be formed. Not to say they're like hard coded, but they're starting to be formed. And you can probably see that because when children are given money in the Western world, particularly, most adults will say, what are you going to go and spend that on? What are you going to go and buy? Oh, that's really exciting. And they'll just see that their parents are going out spending. So in their minds, in those first years where their brains are forming all these connections, they're just seeing money, spending, money, spending. And then as they get older, you have to then go, all right, you need to try and rewire that. And that we know the longer it goes on, the harder it is. So if we can teach kids from the youngest age, save a little bit of money, don't save all of it because that's boring, but save some, get into that habit. And then when they're older, it'll just be easy to save, have those great habits. And if they start to save, they're less likely to use debt, they're less likely to gamble and all that kind of bits that we get when we don't have that patience and haven't had that sort of emergency buffer kind of building up. And plus they get to see that small little bits of saving adds up. And then once you start to see that compounding of money growing, then you go, oh, actually saving's fun. Because everyone who I know who saves loves saving now. It's just getting past that first hurdle where it's small, it seems all insignificant. If kids can learn that and see it from the youngest age, they've got such a head start in life in my mind.
Yeah, perfect thing that you brought up at the very beginning. It's about the habits and the actions that you take, right? So one of the things that we have for our kids, it's like a piggy bank system, right? So it's 3 different piggy banks that they have. One is their spending money, one is their savings, and one is charity, right? So when let's say they get $10, they would put $6 into what they could spend, $3 into their savings, and then $1 into the charity. And what we do is over time, when they build up enough money in the charity bucket, they'll either go buy a toy that we go donate to something, or they'll go give it to a charity of their choice, or they'll give it back to me and my wife, and they'll tell us what they want to donate it to, and then we'll do it online or something. So there's that portion of it, right? So the giving back aspect, but then also the savings, right? So now they're saving like 30% of the money that they're making, right? So that's what we want to have ingrained in their heads. Hey, try to live off of 60% of what you make. Save 30% and give 10%. And and it doesn't have to be that way. If you don't want to give the 10%, you don't have to, but that's just being a good steward to the people around you. And I think that when you have that type of abundance mindset, it comes back to you tenfold, right? So I think that's important. So going into how you do things and I think the biggest takeaway that I got from that whole thing was just starting to build these habits at a very early age. I didn't know that 7 years old is like when that trigger starts, right? When they can start learning about actual money and saving. So that's really good to know. So for the parents out there with young kids, this is something for you to think about as your children get older. Maybe at 7 years old, go set up a system like this where you get a couple different piggy banks for them to use and utilize. That's fantastic. All right. Now, money can be very boring sometimes, especially even for us adults. Sometimes we talk about it, you want to talk about finances, you're like, oh, come on, really? Again? When you try to sit here and explain some of this stuff to the children, it's like, how do you make it engaging? How do you make the conversation fun for them? Now, I understand now you've got this book, and the book is going to be very helpful, but how do you start a conversation with your children to make it like they actually want to talk about money? Because most of the time when I talk to my kids about, oh yeah, we know, we're going to save it, we're going to put this to the side. Whenever we give them money, they're like, oh, okay, I know I can only spend this much. They get a little frustrated about it. So how do you make that engaging and fun?
Yeah, so I use analogy, which is getting children to think of money like seeds. And that's not my analogy. That's in a number of books, even The Richest Man in Babylon that we talked about earlier, but other ones. But I've just really gone to town with this analogy, and my kids love it. So we say to them, look, think of money like seeds. So my youngest was about 4 years old when we started talking about this. And I said, well, you can give those seeds away, and that's just like spending. And they get that. But then they're straight away like a seed, they know you plant. And they're like, what does that mean? And I was like, yep, you can plant a seed, and if you leave it long enough, it will grow into this tree. So it's getting them to visual about these kind of money trees growing. And their job is to grow this kind of money forest. And it just works on so many levels because it just teaches them about the easiest way to talk to anyone about compound interest. Get a seed, plant a tree, that tree produces more seeds. You plant those seeds, grows more trees and compound interest, and you've got a whole forest if you wait long enough. But they also they can visualize it. And I think that's the key piece, and they can talk about it. So when I give my kids money, pocket money, allowance, they'll say, Daddy, can I put this towards my blue trees? So we call the trees blue trees, and hence the name of my website is Blue Tree Savings. And so they're like, oh, can I put towards my blue trees? Or Daddy, how many blue trees do I now have? Or how many does my sister have? And so they love it. And they can talk about it, and they're like, what does it mean when we do plant? And then as they get older, we can explain, okay, that's when we invest the money and the money is growing. What does the seeds mean? And again, we can, as they get older, we talk about those different elements. But also it gives them that sense of security. So I said to my daughters, right, when you get to 18, are you just going to chop down all of your blue trees and just go and spend them? And they're like, no, because they're learning about the environment and all that at school. So they become quite protective of their trees. And we've used it and said, like, Mummy and Daddy are taking time off to spend more time with you because we've got these trees growing. So we're using those seeds to finance our lives. and have this time off. Is that what you want as well? And they're like, yeah. So I find that a really powerful analogy, and it's helping them see money into the future as well, because kids know that if you plant a seed, you don't wake up tomorrow and there's a magic tree has just appeared. They know it's going to happen in the future. And so it's just an easier way for us to talk about it. And then we then apply the detail as they get a bit older. But even from the age of 4, they know that they've got this kind of magical forest growing. And then the other thing I do is I use stories and characters to bring concepts to life. So it's not just giving them a lecture, it's saying, oh, you could be this kind of person or this kind of person, and these are the kind of challenges.
Hey, you know what? As you were sitting here talking about that, I just thought of maybe another fun story you could add to maybe a future book or something. But because there are things out there. So a lot of people think, oh, yeah, I can go and do this program and get rich quick or whatever. And like you just said, you can't just plant a seed and then wake up the next day and have a tree. But I was just thinking about, you know how there's some things out there that are like overnight sensations, like the whole crypto rise that we saw, right? I picture that as like Jack and the Beanstalk, right? You got the 5 magic beans, you plant the magic beans, the next day you have the giant beanstalk, and yeah, you're getting the golden eggs for a little while. It's great. And then now the giant's chasing you and you chop down the beanstalk and you have nothing. Oh man, I just thought about that as you were talking. I was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. Because as soon as you said, oh, there's nothing that grows overnight, I was like, that's a good way to try to maybe teach kids to stay away from stuff anything that looks like you can get rich quick. Stay away from that. Just stay away from that, because it's not something that is going to help you. But yeah, oh man, that's fantastic. Yeah, you can't plant the seed and expect it to grow overnight. As a matter of fact, right now, we're growing some mango seedlings that we have. So my wife has this place over on Maui. It's one of the next islands over, and she loves the mangoes that come from this place. And every time that they ship them over here on Oahu, she'll go and buy them like in bulk, and they're very expensive. They're like $10 mangoes. It's ridiculous. So she likes to stock up in them. She's like, hey, she's like, why don't I plant some of these seeds and see if I can get them to grow? So right now we've got 2 really nice sproutlings and then 2 others just starting to come out. So she's like, hey, maybe in a couple of years we can have that same kind of mango over here. So yeah, it was pretty neat. Definitely like that. So fantastic. Now, there's other things to teach the children about money, right? So you talked a little bit about compound interest, but there's different things you have to invest in to get that compound interest. You're not going to get that just from planting the seed and just watering it and letting it sit there, right? Because that's like a savings account, and you just water it, it's going to grow slowly. It needs fertilizer, right? It needs something that's going to help it grow. So I would think of that as like the stock market or something, right? Or real estate. How do you talk to kids about something like that, about the stock market, and how to do something like that safely?
Yeah. So we've been investing a little bit of money each month for our kids since they're the youngest of age. And so we've been using like a Vanguard global equity fund. So invest in thousands of companies around the world, and we don't do anything really with it. And so my daughters knew that we've been doing some savings and growing these kind of trees. And it was around, I think my eldest, who's now 10, she was 7. And we were sitting in a McDonald's in Hong Kong. And I thought, I'm going to use this opportunity to see if I can teach her about what are these actual trees that we've been growing. So I said to her, each month, Mummy and Daddy put a little bit of money and invest it. And what that means you own a piece of this McDonald's. And she was like, what? And I was like, yep, you a little bit, because you give McDonald's a little bit of money, you own this, you own it. And she's like, I own this tray. I'm like, yep, you own this tray, you own the table, the bin's over there. But more importantly, all those people queuing up to buy their Happy Meals and their Big Macs, they're going to give some money to McDonald's. And because you own a little bit of McDonald's, some of that money is yours. And she just lit up. She was so excited. She was like, really? She's just like standing there sort of watching the little transactions happening. And I was like, yep, not just this McDonald's, but all of the McDonald's around the world. Some people are giving you a little bit of money. And then we walked out of the McDonald's and around the shopping mall. We saw the Apple store. I was like, yeah, all those people buying their iPads and iPods, some of that money's yours. Starbucks. And then we lived in Hong Kong, so you had Disney on the way home. So it's like, yeah, you own a bit of Disney. And she just couldn't believe that she owned this. Again, we didn't really go through how tiny fraction that she actually owned, but she just loved that. And I was like, yeah, and that money we give to McDonald's creates new restaurants, or they create new burgers. So more people are going to give McDonald's more money, and the more money that McDonald's gets, the more money that you get. And that's how your blue trees are growing, the more money them. And yeah, she just got it straight away. And now she wants to own those different bits. She loves investing and seeing that kind of money. And I was like, in purest terms, that when people spend money, they get a little bit poorer, but the companies get a little bit richer, and the companies are owned by people, and those people are you. And even at 7 years old, she got that. And I just thought, that's amazing to have that, not just consumer mindset, but owner mindset. And now we apply that plus the tree analogy is that really works well in terms of investing, because we say, so that's how your trees grow. But every now and then, there's big storms that come along, and those storms can break your trees, and your trees will get smaller. And so this is just teaching them about the stock market falls. And it wasn't long after we'd had this conversation in McDonald's that coronavirus happened. And so I said, yep. So I showed her the chart and showed the stock market going down in whether it was March, February, sort of 2020, and the stock market going down. I was like, look, the coronavirus happened. Everyone's at home. So no one's going out and buying their burgers. So McDonald's isn't getting that money. And therefore, the less money McDonald's makes, the smaller your trees are getting. But don't worry, in the future, people go out and buy burgers again, and there'll be restaurants and it'll grow. And they saw that. And again, just shows that if a storm comes, breaks your tree, we don't just go, all right, let's chop down the trees and never plant a tree again. We say just a tree breaks, after a time, it'll grow back bigger and stronger. And that's exactly what happens with investing in the stock market. So so that's my whirlwind tour of how I taught my daughters about investing in kind of the simplest terms, and hopefully gives them something that most adults don't seem to fully appreciate.
We'll get back to the show after a brief break.
Are you a business owner that constantly struggles with your CRM system and keeping in touch with clients? Well, let me tell you about the CRM system that I personally use. It's called HiveMind CRM, and I'm telling you, it's been a fantastic addition to my tool belt as a real estate investor, as a business owner, and as a financial coach. Go check it out at averagejoefinances.com/CRM. You're gonna love it. Again, that's averagejoefinances.com/CRM.
What's going on, everybody? So today I want to talk to you about Buzzsprout. The Average Joe Finances podcast recently switched over to Buzzsprout, and I got to say, I am super happy with the progress. Our podcast is now on every single major platform and reaching audiences that we couldn't reach before, which is just super awesome. So thank you to Buzzsprout for being such a great platform, but also I want to say, hey guys, if you sign up for Buzzsprout and you sign up for one of their paid plans using our link, you'll get a $20 Amazon gift card. So go check them out. It's averagejoefinances.com/Buzzsprout, and we'll make sure the link is in the show notes below. Let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, that's just a fun way to explain that to a child, right? So when you're sitting here having this discussion, especially when you're sitting down in the restaurant itself and you're saying, yeah, like you actually own a piece of all this because you own that fraction of McDonald's because you have shares, right? So that's really awesome for them to know. And I've not really explained it to my kids that way in the past. And I think I'm going to now because I have the same thing. I have a joint investment account that's there for the kids. It's to be, they don't each have their own. We have one that's for both of them, but we might actually split it off so they each have their own. And then I want them to start making some of their own decisions as to where they want that money going and let them start picking what accounts they're going into and what kind of stocks they're picking up. But right now it's all Vanguard too, right? We stick with pretty much Fortune 500 companies and just keep it nice and safe and diversified and don't really go into any individual stocks. I want them to understand though that it is fractional, like you have different little pieces of all of these companies, right? So that's just a really fun way to explain it. I think I am going to take them to the mall. We're going to walk around and I'm going to start pointing out some of the different companies there and be like, yeah, you actually own a piece of that. You own a piece of that. I think that would make it a little bit more fun for them. But no, actually knowing my youngest daughter, she'll probably walk in there and start talking to the employees like she's their boss. She's really sassy. So I could see us walking into the Apple store and be like, yeah, can I get the employee discount? I'd like a new iPad Pro. And because I own this company, I'd like it for free. I could see her doing that, man. She's a little sassy. Awesome. All right. Now, besides like the stock market, have you talked to your kids about real estate at all as well and how you can use that to grow your blue trees?
Yeah. So we actually distinguish between different ones. So blue trees are their investments in the stock market. And we have talked to them about real estate and say that we own property. So we own real estate in the UK. And we
call land to grow your trees on.
Yeah. And we call them purple trees just to distinguish. And we say that they're much bigger, but you generally don't have a whole forest of them growing. And so we have talked to them about, we have someone living in our home or our old home in the UK, and it's growing, but we have these kind of what we call red bushes on surrounding our purple tree, and that's our mortgage. But luckily we're trimming them down using the seeds from the purple tree to sort of pay to get those red bushes cut down. But it provides them with an understanding, okay, they're different from our blue trees, they're much bigger, so you can't just buy lots of little ones, you have to have quite a big one. And so that in their minds they can understand the difference, and they know that they can't have a purple tree now because you have to have quite a big investment or a large amount of money to have that, but they know that's what they want in the future. And they're not worried about these red bushes. They know that they need to cut them down, but ultimately they're there to support the purple tree as it starts to grow over time. So they know that. So yeah, we've talked to them about that. We've talked to them about other types of investments, crypto and NFTs, etc. And that's actually been some of my most popular blogs about how to teach children, which is mostly, whilst it's to teach children, most of the adults are going, actually, this is really useful for me because it's doing it in a language that goes very back to basics. But ultimately, we want them just to have that core foundation of investing in the stock market is the most sustainable way to grow wealth over the long term. And then we're going to let them know that they do have some aspirations, have these purple trees, but not gone into loads of detail given the likelihood of them owning them in the short term.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that sounds fun, especially because you add the red bushes in so they understand what the mortgage is and everything, and how you want to start trimming those away. They're pretty much like weeds, right? So you want to be pulling these weeds out as you're keeping your yard nice and well maintained, or keeping that purple tree free from all the weeds so it doesn't suffocate it too much. Oh yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Now, when it comes to like teaching your children about financial literacy, you had mentioned that you give your children like an allowance, right? From what I understand, you call it the most underrated financial education tool. So why is that?
Yeah, so going back to what we talked about at the start about money being about habits and behaviors, if they get an allowance every week or month, whatever it may be, but regularly, it allows them to start making money decisions and start to form those habits. Because again, habits takes practice. And if children are only really seeing money on special occasions like birthdays, tooth fairy, any kind of holidays, then money becomes a bit sporadic and it becomes overexcited. If you only get money every 3 months or something and you get, I don't know, $20, whatever it may be, then you want to go and spend it because it's a novelty. Whereas if you get it every kind of week, then okay, you can still go and spend most of it and have that fun with it. But if you get to save a little bit, it's not really taking away lots of their enjoyment from that money. And so having that means that they can form those habits of saving every time, just saving a little bit every time that they get that money. And it also allows them to make mistakes. So they can go and spend impulsively, even if you're as a parent going, that's a complete waste of money, it's junk. It's definitely not worth that. They can make that decision. They can see from themselves, actually, I wish I hadn't bought that, I haven't used it. And it's much better for kids to make those kind of regular small mistakes as children and learn, or with their help, parents help, learn from those mistakes, such that when they're adults, they don't make the same mistakes. Because clearly what happens is most children are never taught about money. If they get to become adults, the amount of money that is involved increases 10 times plus. And then they make mistakes, and it's so powerful, and it makes money depressing. They don't want to think about money because of the mistakes, big mistakes they've made. Whereas if kids make a little mistake, granted they might have lost $10, $20, it's not the end of the world. They'll learn from it and move on. And so I think that's one. The other big piece for me about allowance is taking on financial responsibility. So people often ask me, how much allowance should I give my children? And clearly every family is going to be completely different about their values or how much they can afford to give. Someone told me about this framework and I think it's fantastic, and I use it with my kids, is to say when kids are young, they've got no financial responsibility. When they get to 18, you want them to be pretty much independent, as much as independent, and making as many financial decisions as possible. And allowance lets your children slowly take on that responsibility as they get older. So with my children, we've said, we're only going to buy toys on your birthday and Christmas. We're not going to buy you any toys in between, but we're going to give you an allowance every week, and you can use that money to buy toys. And so they know that allowance has a purpose. It's to buy these toys. And we worked it out about, right, how many toys would we buy over a course of a year broadly, and then split it into weekly chunks. And so they can now choose if they have 50 very small toys, Or they can start going, actually, I want a bigger toy. Okay, I'm going to save up 4 weeks. And then as they get older, we'll give them a little bit more responsibility and we'll give them a bit more of allowance. So it might be casual clothes, right? We're not going to buy you any casual clothes anymore, but we're going to give you more allowance every week. And that is to help you pay for these casual clothes. And we'll work out what we think. So they can go and buy cheap t-shirts, or they can save up and buy something nicer if they want to. And again, as they get older, we'll be saying, we're not just going to sporadically give you money for the cinema. We'll give you a slightly bigger allowance. And that'll mean you can go to the cinema, I don't know, twice a week or whatever it is with your friends. But you might decide not to go to the cinema and buy something else. That's your prerogative. But again, it's just upping the amount of responsibility. And then probably when they're like sometime in teenagers, we'll say, we're going to give you this responsibility, but we're not going to give you any more allowance. Go figure. Go and work out how you can get that money. And then that'll start introducing the concept of needing to earn some money to pay your way.
Well, using the concept of real life. Yes. Sometimes you have to take on more things and you don't get paid for it. That's a very good point. And it makes me think about, so we're coming to a period now where my daughter's about to be 13 and we're talking about getting her a cell phone, right? And we figured, hey, 13 is a good age that we feel comfortable doing it and we can manage it and make sure it's not going to get out of control. One of the things that we talked about is, because on our plan to add another line, it's like an extra $10 a month. So we said, okay, we were going to add her to the plan, but I want her to pay the $10 a month. She's got to pay her own cell phone bill. So she'll be doing that with her allowance money. So not only does she have to put the money to the side and save and then put the money away for charity, I want her to pay bills so she understands the responsibility of what to spend that money on. Then with whatever she has left over, that's stuff she can go out and buy a toy with if she wants, or if she wants to buy in like Robux or something for her game. This is so she's not blowing it all on that stuff. Because if I don't give her some type of bills that she's going to be responsible for, I already know what that money is going to get spent on. This gives that opportunity, right, to give her a little more responsibility and still like that sense of pride when she's able to take care of these responsibilities that she has and she can do it on her own without asking mom or dad for money. She's doing it with her own money. And if you give your kids a little bit of that self-independence, it could really carry itself a long way, especially as they get older and go into adulthood, because it's something they've been experiencing now. They're not experiencing it for the first time when they graduate high school and they get a job and they move out on their own. And the first time they're paying a bill is when they're paying their rent payment, right? Because mom and dad are still paying their cell phone and still paying for their car insurance and things like that, right? That can be very surprising and alarming to some people when they've never been in that situation before where they had to pay any bills or anything like that. So I think that's really huge that we start trickling these things in as they get older to have them understand the responsibility that comes with an income, right? Whether it's an income or even if it's passive income, because if they're getting an allowance, most likely it's passive income, unless you have them doing chores and stuff, which they're doing chores, right? They're earning their money, but at the same time, I want them to know that, you know, what they do with their money is very important and how they spend it's very important, and they should be very responsible with it. That's awesome stuff, Will. Yeah, sure.
I'd love the fact that you talked about surprises. And I think this is, every family hopefully will start doing some different things with money. And there's no right or wrong answer. As you just talked about chores, some families do chores for pocket allowance and some don't. There's no right or wrong, really. We have our own view, and people, some parents even charge tax on the allowance, etc. to try and choose. That's up to them.
I thought about it.
It's different views, and I think it can all work in that kind of depending on your family. But I think the key piece, and it's about that surprises. So whenever we change anything with our daughters, we don't just say, right, today we're going to change and now you're doing this. We say to them, at some point, we're going to do something different. So we're going to give you more allowance and you're going to have more responsibility. And this is the reason why we're going to do that. But we don't do it here and now today, because children don't like that kind of change, but they can buy into stuff if it's in the future and they know that it's coming. So when we do introduce it, they understand it and they know it's coming. Whereas I think you've heard some horror stories where parents just go, we've just read this blog and right, we're going to change everything about what we do with our family finances. Kids, you've now got to go and mow the lawn and you're going to get an allowance and we're not going to buy this, that or the other. And it's just they just get into a massive argument and the kids hate it. Whereas if you teach them say, we're going to change it and this is why, we want to give you more responsibility. So when you're an adult, blah, blah, blah. So I think that word surprises. And the other thing on that is I know a lot of parents or families who are saving money to give their kids when they're 18 or 21, whatever it is. But they're not telling their kids about it. And so they're like, because They don't want their kids to be entitled, blah, blah, blah. But my fear is that if you give a child, an 18-year-old, a big cash and they have no foresight of it, they're just going to see it as like the lottery win. And we know how good lottery winners are with money. They're just going to feel they don't know where it's come from, and they're going to get overexcited and spend it. And so parents who are saving for their kids, I strongly recommend that you let your kids know about it so they can start as early as possible planning what they're going to do with that money. And those plans can be changed and altered, but the more you plan for it, the less likely it's going to be wasted in an impulsive kind of way.
Yeah, that is a fantastic point. As a matter of fact, that is something I actually do with my kids. I explain to them, this is how much money that's saved in here. This is what it's invested in. And this is how it's going. As a matter of fact, recently had to explain to them how much they lost as things have been dropping. But I said, don't worry, don't fret. As you would say, the trees grow back. Those branches will mend and they'll grow back. I haven't explained it to them in that way, but I think I'm going to start talking to them about the seeds in the trees. I think that is just so much more genuine. Like I told you before, I'm really excited to read this book to them and make it part of their financial literacy curriculum because, you know, we homeschool our kids. So I think it's part of their homeschooling is learning financial literacy. I think that's huge. And then the other thing too, like you said, you don't just want to spring a big surprise on them. Let them know something's coming because in the real world, yes, sometimes you'll have something just sprung on you and you got to react right away. But most of the time you can foresee a couple things coming, like changes at work and things like that. And you have time to prepare and get ready for that. So make it realistic for your kids that they have time to understand. And because that's a very good point. If you just try to drop something on them, it's not going to bode well. And you need to sit down and have that conversation, not just be like, surprise, here's what we're doing now. In some aspects that could work for certain things, but not for something if you're going to be telling them that you're going to be taking some of their money away or you're going to be giving them more responsibilities. Trust me, kids would rather play more games than do more responsibilities, especially when it comes to stuff around the house. That's a very fair point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Now, I'd like to transition this a little bit into something that we call the final round. And this is going to touch a little bit more about you personally, Will, and your own journey as you've gotten to the point where you are right now. So I'm pretty excited for this point because it sounds like you've done some amazing things throughout your time and just in your journey in life in general. And now living in Thailand after, where were you at before? Vietnam. Just being able to live in these different areas and immerse yourself in these different cultures. You have a very exciting story and a very exciting life that you're giving to your families. That's awesome. So if you're ready to go, we'll get the final round started.
Yep. Okay,
let's do it. All right. So the first question is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made?
So I think if I'll talk about it in money terms, because I think when I first started earning, I got a bit like everyone else. I got overexcited about having some money. And so I actually bought some kind of expensive watches. And at the time, I loved them. I felt, look at me, I'm an actuary. I earned some money and I got these watches. And they were expensive. They were super expensive to maintain as well because you have to go and get them serviced. And now I don't ever wear them because you don't walk around in Vietnam and Thailand with very expensive watches on because I generally wear a watch and I just wear a sports watch now. And now I wish I was looking back on that and going, why did I buy them? Was it for me or was it for everyone else? And I feel like I was showing off a little bit. I felt it was keeping up with the Joneses, my way of saying I'm doing well, but actually, yeah, I wish I hadn't done that and just saved that money and had that money and kind of invested and didn't do more for myself, even if I'd gone on fancy holidays or something like that. I think that's one bit I wish because I wouldn't get the money back from them anywhere near as much as I paid for them. So I think, yeah, that's my biggest kind of financial mistake that I've made.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it depends, though, because some of those collectible watches do go up in value over time. So, for example, a couple different versions of Rolex, some people buy them actually as an investment. So you might want to check to see how much some of those watches might be worth now. You might be able to sell them now at this point and invest that money into something else.
Yeah, so I think that's going to keep. So I don't want people to put off all spending, but I think it's why you bought them. And I think at the time,
yeah, absolutely.
I didn't buy them for investment. I wasn't trying to be clever. I was trying to be showing up. I think, and that's I think that.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And a lot of people that when they start getting to a point where they're getting a higher income or they're starting to make a little bit of money and they think, oh, okay, I need this to prove to everybody else that this is what I'm doing. And you don't need to do that. If you just spent that on something else, maybe instead of buying the Rolex, you invested the money in the company itself, or instead of buying the brand new iPad, you go and take that money that you would have invested to buy the iPad and invest it in the stock, in Apple stock, and then go buy a used one. Maybe that's just something to think about as well. All right, awesome. This all kind of ties into what the next question is.
And throughout your time, I'm sure you've learned quite a bit, especially during these transitions as you've moved to different countries now. What is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first got started?
Yeah. And I think it's very similar to what I was wanting to spell. So moving to Vietnam was just a game changer in terms of kind of my mindset towards money. So I say I've worked in the financial industry. I've worked in London and Hong Kong, where there's just a whole amount of abundance, people spending lots. And in Vietnam, people don't have as much. It's a developing country, and we got to meet so many Vietnamese families and get involved in their kind of daily lives. And they were some of the friendliest, kindest people I've ever met. Like we were like the foreigners, and there was a big sort of storm coming one day, and the amount of people came to our house to make sure we taped up our windows and were okay. They obviously thought these foreigners have no idea what's coming in terms of the storm. But the key bit for me is that you don't need loads of money to be happy. And it really hit home more than you hear that and different people talk about it. But that life experience of actually seeing that these families were fun, like we had the most amount of fun just when they have a Vietnamese New Year called Tet. And just all their family around, loads of food, bitters, but it's all no frills. It's just good food, good company, sitting on plastic stools on a sort of metal table. But it's the most fun, and they're all so happy. And so I think it's a great experience for my daughters, again, especially going from Hong Kong, where you're going for like a pizza meal and paying sort of $60 equivalent. And you're like, well, it's just a plane. Whereas, I didn't want that to be their expectation of life. And they've just seen this whole other side of the world. So yeah, really understanding that you don't need loads of money to be happy. Clearly you have to have some, and hence why I'm teaching my kids about looking after their money. But it's not so they have loads of stuff. It's to have opportunities to do stuff and see new people, experience the world, these new cultures, I think is the biggest lesson about money.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic, because that time that you get, that quality time is huge. And when you can spend that just enjoying your family, enjoying the people around you, it might not be, they say money can't buy happiness, but it gets you time, right? So if you have enough of it to where you can be comfortable and get that time back, which is what you were able to do, get away from the corporate world, get your time back because you planted enough seeds and grew this forest that you had this money that you can live off of and not have to worry about spending that time trying to earn more money. That's fantastic. What a great way to live life.
Exactly.
All right, awesome. Okay, so the next question I have, and this kind of ties into that as well. And so, you've had so many different experiences as you've gone through and have done this, but do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started today?
So I think the key one is to keep it super simple. I think what most people do is they go too hard. They try and change too much. It's a bit like dieting. Like I'm fortunate I've gone to try to do lots of exercise. So you get up to January 1st, you're like, right, I'm going to do a run every single day. I'm going to run 5 or 10 kilometers every day. But you set the hurdle too high. And you don't have any fun because you're like, I'm not going to eat all this junk. I'm not going to have any beers. And it becomes too much, and it never lasts, and people quit. And so I always say, if you're going to make a change, just keep it realistic. Just keep it so you can still spend majority of what you're spending, but just rein it back a little bit and make sure you save at least 10 or 20% of your money before you go spending. Don't make it that you're going to save 50%. You go from zero savings to 50% of income savings, because you don't want to be eating baked beans every day on toast. It's just not sustainable. And it's too big, and most people don't, just give up. So I say it's fantastic that you want to change, but start small, see that impact, be patient, and over time just gradually increase. So when you get your next pay rise, don't change your lifestyle. So it shouldn't have an impact, and then you can just save that increase. So you're not changing much today, but in the future you're going to change, and that's going to be game changer. It's all about those habits. So just start small, save, just even if it's 10%. Do it, and do it all the time. And then over time, that'll be a game changer. Don't try and go for the full guns, fireworks approach. It's just never sustainable.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Will. It's all about those habits and just small habits that you can be repetitive with and just keep doing that every single time. And as you force yourself to do it at first, over time, it just becomes so ingrained that you're not forcing yourself anymore. It's just a natural thing that you do. Habits and taking action. I absolutely love that. All right, fantastic. So I have one more question of the final round. And I have a feeling I know what some of these might be here. So I'm going to say besides your own and besides Richest Man in Babylon and Rich Dad, Poor Dad, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both?
So yeah, you've just taken away two of my best ones. But so one of the books I've read a number of times is I love The Marshmallow Experiment. I thought that book. So for people who don't know that, it's all about delayed gratification. So it's a fantastic experiment in the 1970s where they got children to just essentially decide to eat one marshmallow now, wait 15 minutes and then eat later, have two marshmallows later. But just the background behind the experiment, the different types of experiments they did, and then the outcome, I just thought was fascinating. And it, again, changed a lot of my mindset towards money, but also how I think about money and talk to my children about money. And then what I really like in terms of a podcast is there's a podcast in the UK by a guy called Jason Butler. And what he does is he gets people on the show and just to talk about just their money experience. So they're people of all different backgrounds. And so I find that really fascinating because everyone has a different money story. And as you started this podcast about my story, but people have different backgrounds. So it goes right back to their childhood about what did your parents think about money? How did your parents think about money? And just hearing some of these stories, you start to get a real good understanding about why people think about money the way they do today because of that. And that's the hard thing about when you're doing your podcast and I've written a book and there's all these other books. Everyone's getting this new information, but starting at completely different points. And once you start to appreciate other people's points, you can start to say, oh, okay, I wish my parents had done that, or I can see why that person might have an advantage over me. And it starts to give you a little bit more empathy towards people's money stories and how they're thinking about money. So when you see other people who might be struggling, it's not because they're just stupid and don't know, it's because that's probably just what they've just been going through. So yeah, Jason Butler's podcast in the UK, I found fascinating stories.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you brought up as well, Will, especially when you talk about everybody comes from a different background. Everyone learns differently. Everyone has a different story when it comes to how they got to where they are today. Everyone has a different money story. Everyone has a different relationship with money. But the thing that I find that everyone has in common for the people that are successful with their money is that they all took action, right? They took action. And like you said, they built habits. Right. So stuff like that is huge. So there's so many different ways to do it. You could build your wealth in real estate. You could build your wealth in the stock market. You can even build your wealth in crypto if that's the route you want to go. I don't know too much about it, so I don't really mess with that stuff. But there are so many different ways. You can build a business. There are so many different things you can do to build wealth and build a legacy for yourself and your family. You're never going to get there if you don't take action and if you don't make moves on it. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that people get scared to do is to take that leap, to take that jump and that leap of faith. That's huge. So I appreciate you sharing that aspect of that and with what Jason Butler shares on his podcast with the different stories, because you never really think about that. What is like the background of this individual that we're talking to? Like, how did your parents teach you about money? Did they teach you about money? How did you learn about money? So those are little things that are awesome. And now that I think about that, I might add some of these questions here as I'm bringing more people on the show. But yeah, that's fantastic. So that's it for the final round, Will. But I do have one more question for you. And this is probably the most important question of all, because this conversation was awesome. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy how you put these stories together to make this so much more understandable for kids, but not only for kids. Like I'm telling you, if an adult goes and picks up Grandpa's Fortune Fables and they can't understand it, I don't know what else to tell you there. But if you're having a hard time reading Richest Man in Babylon, like I know some people do because it's written very much like it's the King James Bible, right? But if you're having trouble reading that, go read this book. It's going to explain some of those same basic principles that you need to understand. And I'm really glad that I have a copy of it, and I appreciate that so much. But now, so speaking of that, people might want to say, hey, I want to get a copy of this book, right? Or I want to find out more information about Will. So where can people find this information about you? Where can we find your book? Do you have a website, social media, or anything like that you could share with us?
Yeah, certainly. So my website is bluetreesavings.com. So that's all one word, bluetreesavings.com. And on there, so luckily that's family finance blog of the year in the UK. So every week I produce a new blog, which is to help parents teach their kids about money. So just recently written one, which is the movie Frozen that everyone knows, but rewritten to be about money. So instead of uncontrollable ability to freeze everything, she just can't control her spending, but same storyline. But on my website, got all my blogs to cover pretty much every money topic that you want to teach your kids. And it has more about Grandpa's Fortune Fables on there. So you can learn about the book, but the book's available on Amazon. And so, please go to Amazon. You can buy ones. If you wanted to buy multiple books for schools, clients, friends, then on my website, you can buy, if you're buying 5 or more, then you get a discount through that. But I'm on LinkedIn. So just Will Rainey on LinkedIn. I generally try and post a few times with some tips. Also on Instagram, so Grandpa's Fortune Fables with underscores between the words, and not so much on Facebook and Twitter at the moment, but that might change under Blue Tree Savings. But just on that, about the book and your last point, luckily enough, I get quite a number of really positive reviews about the book. But the ones that I've really take to heart are the ones where people say, we've read your book and my daughter or son is now starting a business, or we're now investing. So they're taking action. And that's the best thing about the reviews, is when I hear people not just enjoying the book and the stories and characters, but they're taking action. So so that's Blue Tree Savings and Grandpa's Fortune Fables.
All right, fantastic. Hey, everybody, I'm going to make sure those links are in the show notes to make it easy for you, so you can just click them or copy and paste. But hey, key thing, if you're not getting anything out of this episode, it's to go take action. And I feel the same way, Will, when I get a DM or something like that on LinkedIn or Instagram or on Facebook Messenger, or somebody leaves a review and they're talking about how, hey, this episode like really opened my eyes to something, or this helped change my life. Things like that mean more to me than anything else that I can get out of doing this podcast. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, especially since you just moved a week ago. I know you're probably not even finished unpacking yet, but greatly appreciate this. And this was really fun. Great conversation. I'm really excited about your book, and I hope some people go check it out. But again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on the show. It's great talking with you.
All right. Aloha from Hawaii. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.
Thanks for listening to the Average Joe Finances podcast, your source for beating debt, saving money, and investing. Learn more at averagejoefinances.com.